is officially okay to think that Capcom is cool again. I didn't think I would ever say that again, because there were some years of Capcom where it was just like, yo, Capcom, what are you doing, buddy? What are you doing? But the past 2 years for Capcom have been absolutely fantastic. Whether you're talking about 2018 with the awesome lineup of games that we got, such as Monster Hunter World, a real evolution of the Monster Hunter series, Resident Evil 7, an evolution of the Resident Evil series, the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, something that I've played way too much, and of course Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, a fantastic Monster Hunter experience on the Nintendo Switch. And 2019 has been off to a really great start as well. Sure, there's the whole Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil Remake, Resident Evil 4, Nintendo Switch fiasco, but we did get Resident Evil 2, which was a fantastic remake and one of the best games so far of 2019. And now we have Devil May Cry 5. Now, to be honest with you guys, Devil May Cry is a series that I never really got into. I don't know much about the series. I played the first game on the PS2, I thought it was really fun, but I never pursued the series after that. But when I saw Devil May Cry 5 at E3 2018, I was absolutely blown away with it. I thought the game looked so cool, and as a fan of games like Bayonetta and Bayonetta 2, it looked like something that would be right up my alley. So the day has finally come, Devil May Cry 5 has been released, and I've been playing this game for a few days now, and I have some things to say about it. So sit back, relax, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and let's talk about why Devil May Cry 5 is a must-buy.
Hey, RGT 85. Hey, Sean.
Oh my god, it's Stevie Richards! The story of Devil May Cry 5 takes place after the events of Devil May Cry 4, but as someone who didn't play Devil May Cry 4, I was a bit worried that maybe I wouldn't understand what the hell was going on in this game. Basically, the game starts out with you playing as a character named Nero, who battles and loses to a massive demon who rips his arm off containing the Devil Breaker, and Nero narrowly escapes with his life. A little while later, a guy named V hires Dante and his crew to take out a demon who has some evil tree and is killing people for blood. Everyone ends up crossing paths as they have the same target, and thus the story of taking out this massive demon begins. Now, for fans of previous Devil May Cry games, there's a lot here to enjoy, as like I said, the story does continue directly from Devil May Cry 4. But as someone who wasn't familiar with the plotline of the previous games, I was a bit confused at times, but even just on the surface and taking Devil May Cry 5 as its own game with its own story, I thought the story was good enough. There's a nice plot twist towards the end, and enough things happen throughout the game to keep the game flowing throughout. If you really want to get caught up to speed with the Devil May Cry universe though, there's a video you can watch that details the events from previous Devil May Cry games and all of the story elements from them. You play Devil May Cry 5 with all three aforementioned characters, Nero, V, and Dante, each having their own missions in which you use them in. Each of the characters feels very different from one another, which gives the game some really interesting depth. Nero gets his arm replaced with something called a Devil Bringer, which allows for unique attacks or defense mechanisms while you play through the game. There's a pretty good variety of Devil Bringers to find throughout the game as well. Nero also has a grappling hook-like mechanic that allows him to bring in enemies closer or climb atop of bigger and stronger enemies and bosses. Of course, Nero also has some guns and blades to use as well. V is probably the most unique character out of the three. When playing as V, you control an eagle and a panther that dish out major damage, and also a large golem that's a special attack, all while you control V and avoid enemies that are trying to kill you. Once enemies are weakened enough, V then uses his staff to finish them off. Dante plays a bit more like Nero, but has a few things that differentiate himself from him. Aside from the standard guns and blades, Dante can also use different styles that focus on certain gameplay elements, such as a gunslinger to focus more on the guns, or a swordmaster to focus more on your blades. Each character can unlock new abilities, moves, and improve upon current abilities via the customization in the game. You purchase these upgrades by using red orbs, which are found throughout the missions in the game, and by defeating enemies. Customization is key in upgrading your characters, and you can also find some hidden items and weapons in levels as well. Red orbs are plentiful in the world, so be sure to use them up. One of my minor complaints about Devil May Cry 5 involves the switching between characters between the missions. Certain missions have you play as certain characters, and sometimes switching between the different characters can be a bit jarring as they all have different moves and different playstyles in which you play as. Personally, I preferred playing as V, with Dante a close second and Nero third, as I was able to get SSS rankings in battles while playing with V and Dante pretty often, but very rarely with Neo. The rankings are based on how you perform in battles, trying to string together big combos and avoid enemy attacks. There seems to be a lot of people online that love Nero and love playing as Nero though, so maybe I'm just weird. One thing that is cool about Devil May Cry 5 is the fact that there are some missions in which online co-op is introduced, and it's very seamless. The mission starts out and you choose which character you want to play as, and then you're thrust into the world. You'll notice that the character you didn't pick may have someone playing as them helping you along. So for instance, if you pick V for a mission, you may see another player in your game playing as Nero alongside you. There's not many missions that contain this, but I thought it was a pretty neat touch. Speaking of missions, there are 20 main story missions in the game, each taking anywhere from about 15 to 40 minutes or so to complete. Aside from the previous mentioned hidden weapons and areas in the game, there's also hidden levels you can find as well, which task you with some sort of challenge in order to unlock more items upon completion of the challenge. Once you beat the game, some additional content is unlocked as well, so there's a ton of stuff in replay value if you enjoy the core game. It took me about 10 to 11 hours on my first playthrough of the game to complete it, playing on standard difficulty. There was an easier difficulty, but as someone who wasn't too familiar with the Devil May Cry series, I found the normal difficulty was even a bit easy at times, so I wouldn't really recommend playing the easier difficulty. The gameplay of Devil May Cry 5 is fast, frantic, and very smooth. As mentioned previously, while you're in battles, you're trying to get the highest rating that you can, from D to SSS. This is done by doing combos and avoiding enemies' attacks. Controls are responsive and tight, but there is a bit of a learning curve when you're using them. One thing I notice that sometimes gets in the way is the camera for auto-targeting. You can use the right analog stick to control the camera in freeform, but I found myself not really being able to do that too often in the middle of battle, because you're pretty much using all of your fingers on the different buttons when fighting. It isn't enough to ruin the gameplay experience or anything though, as most of the time the camera ends up working itself out. In terms of presentation, Devil May Cry 5 is mostly fantastic. The visual style of the game is very clean and smooth, with literally no frame rate drops even when the action is at its most hectic. Enemies are varied, boss battles are huge, and there are some truly epic moments within this game. I honestly feel like Capcom absolutely nailed it with the graphics of this game. In terms of audio, it's mostly positive with a few minor complaints. The soundtrack is great, with mostly industrial metal tracks that keep your blood flowing, and even a few techno tracks thrown in as well. Voiceovers sound good for the most part, but some of the voice samples are repeated way too much for my liking. Pin 'em to the wall will be absolutely burned in your head. Also, occasionally the game audio would stop for a split second while playing the game on my Xbox One S, but I don't know if that was a problem with just my copy or others will experience that as well. I did want to briefly mention it though. But really, one of the biggest takeaways I have with Devil May Cry 5 is just how complete of a package it is. You have so many games that come out nowadays that nickel and dime you to death with things like DLC, microtransactions, all this stuff that wants you to spend extra money. But with Devil May Cry 5, you're getting the complete package of the game. There's unlockable stuff that you unlock by playing the game and beating the game. There's a ton of stuff that unlocks when you beat the game, and there's a lot of reason to go back and replay these missions and replay through things to unlock more things. And that's just something you honestly don't see too much in modern gaming. It almost feels like a throwback to the PS2 era, when you bought a game, you bought pretty much the complete game. Devil May Cry 5 really surprised me. I thought I would enjoy the game, but I didn't think I would enjoy the game as much as I have been. It looks great, it sounds great for the most part, and it plays really great as well. There's so much customization, there's so many cool epic moments and huge boss battles that happen throughout the game. It was just an absolute joy to play. I'm definitely going to play through the game some more, check out the stuff that I unlocked by defeating the game, and just check out the game more in general. I really hope that this sets the precedent for Capcom in 2019. They've released two amazing games so far with Resident Evil 2 and Devil May Cry 5, and I'm very curious to see what Capcom has for us in the future. I'm almost willing to overlook this Resident Evil on Nintendo Switch situation with just how good Resident Evil 2 and of course Devil May Cry have been. Almost. Almost. But those are my thoughts on Devil May Cry 5. So let me know in the comments section down below what you think of this game. Did you pick up this game yet? Were you waiting for some more reviews to come out? Or is Devil May Cry just a game that you haven't been interested in? Honestly, it was a series that I wasn't really super interested in, but now I kind of want to go back and play the other games because honestly, I feel like I was missing out on something. And as always, thank you for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Check out other videos on this channel, and as always, I will catch you guys on the next video. Later.